Hey everybody, it's Anne, and today's video is going to be all about albums you should not judge by the single. Now, I'll let you know right now, this is going to be mostly albums, well actually it's going to be entirely albums by pretty huge mainstream artists, because I feel like those are the albums where we're going to kind of hear the singles, whether we really keep up with that artist or not, and it's human nature to form a judgment based on those singles. But sometimes when you go and listen to a full album, obviously, you end up with a different impression. So in some cases that's because maybe the singles just weren't as good. They just weren't the best songs on the record. I have some cases where the album kind of has like overall themes and narratives that can't really shine through on a single song. And I also have some where the album's just kind of so eclectic and all over the place that like there was really no feasible way for the artist to actually, demonstrate the album's variety with just a couple songs. So there's no particular order here. Let's get going. So album number 1 on our list is going to be Beyonce's Lemonade. The two singles that I feel like were kind of out and about in the world, even if you weren't trying to listen to the album at all, were Formation, which she performed at the Super Bowl. That was kind of the main lead single that was out and about before the rest of the album dropped. And then also Sorry, which is the one that has like the Becky with the good hairline, and then Twitter freaked out over that. Technically, other songs that were released as singles include Hold Up, Freedom, which features Kendrick Lamar, and then I believe All Night as well. But the two that I definitely remember like hearing were Sorry and Formation. And I also remember kind of saying, well, that album's not really for me. I don't really listen to a lot of like rap, hip hop stuff. And that was fine. Not every album has to be intended for me and my tastes. But it wasn't until like other friends that were really into this album were like, no, you gotta listen to the whole thing, you gotta watch the film that goes with it, that I really kind of got on the Lemonade bandwagon. For one, this is an album with a narrative. In the earlier songs, we're talking about kind of Beyonce finding out that her husband's cheating on her and kind of the different feelings she goes through with that. And then kind of the later tracks talk about the process of reconciling with that partner. And Formation, doesn't really touch on this at all. Like, you would never guess based on Formation that this album is primarily about, infidelity in a relationship. And it's kind of used as, it's the final track of the album, and it's used as kind of the like, I'm back bitches song after Beyonce's been through all this shit. Sorry does deal with cheating. But it's still kind of in that very much like rap, hip-hop kind of like music you would expect Beyonce to make. But what makes Lemonade so cool is that she uses a lot of different genres, a lot of songs that sound like none of those singles, to kind of illustrate different moods and feelings within that narrative. So track 2 is a song called Hold Up, which, like I said, I think technically was a single. But Hold Up is like a reggae song, and it's kind of about like Beyonce trying to still be chill about it. Like, she knows her man's cheating, but she's trying to put on a brave, chill, relaxed face. So reggae is used to kind of symbol that like chill, relaxed vibe. That kind of segues into this more explosive alternative rock track she did with Jack White called Don't Hurt Yourself. And like, I had never heard a song by Beyonce that sounds like that. Later you get kind of this country song, which is, her reflecting on growing up in Texas. And kind of the lessons that, it's called Daddy Lessons, and it's about the stuff, her father teached her. Teached is not a word, by the way. Taught is the right one. And then I also love Sandcastles, which is just this like very gentle piano ballad. And I love when artists like Beyonce that are so good at doing these like over-the-top, super choreographed, hella amazing theatric performances also just kind of take the time to be like, yeah, I just need a piano in my voice and we're good. And Sandcastles definitely does that. So yeah, Lemonade is definitely one of those albums that you shouldn't judge by the singles, because there's a lot of individual tracks on here that are really good that don't really sound like those singles. It's also one where every single song on here whether it be one of the singles, whether it be kind of the more expected sound from Beyonce or some of these other genres that she's fooling around with. Every song on here gets better within the context of that full album listen. Moving on to album number 2, we've got Melodrama by Lorde. The song you know from this is most likely Green Light. The other 2 singles, I don't really ever remember hearing much of. Apparently Perfect Places and then Homemade Dynamite were also released as singles. I forgot to Google where they charted, but I can Google that in post. We'll put some text somewhere.
Hey, this is Anne in post-production. The information was too much to put in text. Yes, Homemade Dynamite did make it to number 92 on the Hot 100. However, the version that charted also featured Khalid, Post Malone, and SZA. The version that Lorde did all by herself, which is the one that appears on the album, did not chart at all. And Perfect Places didn't chart at all either. So, yeah.
But yeah, Green Light is the song you know from this album that you probably judge the whole album off of. And I remember Melodrama took me a little while to get into. I didn't really see what the hullabaloo was about it. And I realized later it was because I went into this album expecting it to sound like Green Light. And it really does not. Most of the songs on here are far more like reflective and subdued. They're very... I guess alternative. I hate the word alternative as a descriptor for music because it just means I don't know what to call this. But it's very much like stuff that wasn't intended to be radio friendly, stuff that was intended to be a little maybe more experimental, a little more original, which is cool. But definitely like Green Light I feel like was only put on here because this album needed that like big pop radio anthem. The rest of it is still really good though. It's another one that, like Lemonade, I think is better in full album form. A lot of the songs on here I don't really go out of my way to listen to as individual songs, but when you kind of spend a whole, I think it's like about 40 some minutes for the album listen, all these songs are a little bit better as, you know, Lorde kind of grapples with the different facets of kind of breaking up with someone and you know, what she's going through as the result of that. I would say one song which I had thought was a single, maybe it was only a promotional single, but Liability is really good, and I would say that's a better one to listen to figure out if you would want to listen to the whole album. If you like Liability, that's going to be more indicative of your full album opinion than Green Light, because nothing else on this album is quite that upbeat or like just catchy. So, moving on to album number 3, we've got Kesha's Rainbow. Now, this is the album that gave us Praying, and also Learn to Let Go and Woman, which she did with the Dap Kings. Or actually, I think it was just the Dap Kings horn section. I don't think it was all the Dap Kings. But, those other 2 songs are still good, still released as singles, but the one you know is Praying. And Praying is amazing. Praying is great. I was one of many people who just like heard that song and my whole like fundamental view of Kesha as an artist just changed upon hearing that song. And, you know, it's good. I have nothing bad to say about Praying. It's going to go down in history as like one of Kesha's kind of most memorable tracks. However, there's no other song on here like that song. This isn't like, say, an Adele album where like the lead single is like a sad piano ballad and then you buy the album and you're like, other sad piano ballads. Like, there's really not much in the way of ballads anywhere else on this album. And this is also one that is just so eclectic that it would be really hard to pick any kind of single song. No set of 2 or 3 songs could really like encapsulate what Rainbow is. There's a surprising amount of like country influence. There's like a collaboration with Dolly Parton on here, but then you have things like Hunt You Down, which has kind of like a honky-tonk vibe. You have things like Bastards. You have Boots, Finding You. You know, fair amount of like country influence that I did not expect. She also has 2 songs on here with Eagles of Death Metal, who I personally am not super duper familiar with, outside of their work with Kesha. Well, and by not super duper familiar with, I mean I literally don't know another song by them to my knowledge. But yeah, those are definitely more like upbeat, fun, going out kind of songs. And then you have like some kind of quiet, folksy stuff towards the end of the album. Just like not the best album for people that really insist that their albums be like cohesive and have like a clear, focused vision supported by every track. It's a very like all over the place kind of album, but like every song is good. So so yeah, that's one that I think is definitely not the album I expected it to be based on the singles, but certainly worth a listen. Our next album is by a group very close to my heart, and that is One Direction, specifically the album 4, which is called that not only because it's the 4th album this band put out, but also because it foreshadowed how many people would end up being in the group on subsequent works. There's 2 singles from this. There's Steal My Girl, and then there's Night Changes. And I think there's a reason that, like, neither one of these is gonna go down as, like, none of these are ever gonna have the legacy of, like, A Story of My Life or What Makes You Beautiful. None of these are gonna be, like, the One Direction songs that people remember 10 years from now. And that's because I just... Like, there's so much good shit on this album that they could have gone with. But no, they picked Steal My Girl, which I would say is just by far the worst song on here. It's one that sounds like it was written for pop stars that cannot actually sing, and One Direction can. And one of the other songs, called Fireproof, was put out as like a promotional single. And I thought that would have been a way better pick. Like, you get some really good vocal harmonies going on there. And... instead, they put out this just kind of like, you know, pop, like, stupid, kind of misogynist nonsense called Steal My Girl, and I don't enjoy it. You know, it has, like, a verse of, like, 4 notes, and, again, like, there's so many good songs on it. I love Where Do Broken Hearts Go, which has, like, this sort of 80s rock anthem sort of vibe to it. I love like Ready to Run. They have 18, which is like an Ed Sheeran written song, and we all know that if Ed Sheeran wrote this song, it's gonna be fine. So like, they had so many other options they could have got. You can tell this is like the first one we've gotten to where I'm just like angry because they just picked a shitty song for the single. And I think it's also sad because this is the album where One Direction really had completed their transition from like bubblegum pop, not just bubblegum, but like very bubblegum, like cotton candy flavored bubblegum pop, like, and they kind of ended up in a place that was still pop, but maybe a little more like Jason Mraz, John Mayer, kind of like pop made for people over the age of 16, and like, they didn't really necessarily pick singles that would make the album come off that way. So unless you were like already in the fandom and like bound and determined to listen to this either way, I can see why a lot of people would look at 4 and be like, not for me. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. Definitely good if you are into like pop music that has more of like a rock influence as opposed to like a hip-hop R&B influence. So yeah, that's 4 by One Direction. Another one I want to talk about is Katy Perry's One of the Boys, kind of on that same note of like rock influenced pop. I think this is also one where, at least for me, my views on it have been warped by the other music Katy Perry went on to put out after this album. So I think it's easy in 2019 to forget that Katy Perry really started out as almost like an Avril Lavigne, Alanis Morissette type of thing, where she looked at the rock world, looked at what was happening over there, and then kind of just repackaged those rock trends for a pop audience. You know, so the singles you're gonna remember from this are I Kissed a Girl and Hot and Cold. Hot and Cold is definitely like the poppiest track on here. I Kissed a Girl is definitely like a little bit more indicative of what the rest of the album sounds like. You might also remember Waking Up in Vegas was from this album. That's very indicative of what the rest of the album sounds like. And then also Thinking of You, which was a single, but I feel like no one remembers it. And there's also a song on here called You're So Gay, spelled You-R, like, so gay. Now I will say, that song is shit. I will not stand by that song. It's irredeemable. It was bad then. It has aged even worse. So that's another one you might remember, even though it wasn't technically a single. But outside of that one song, this is actually a solid album. And it's one where I wouldn't necessarily say the singles don't sound like the rest of the album, but I would say a lot of the deeper cuts are just better. And I think it's interesting how much of this could have just been marketed as pop punk if they had decided to market her that way. So like songs like If You Can Afford Me, songs like Fingerprints. My personal favorite from this album is Self-Inflicted, and all three of those I think could have just as easily been pushed to alternative radio as like pop punk songs if her label had decided to go that direction. So people who, you know, maybe don't really remember 2008, it's weird that that was that long ago, but you know, like if you're like 14, 15 watching this and you don't actually remember when this album came out and you think that based on what Katy Perry's making now, she's just not for you, this kind of more live sounding rock-ish type pop might be more your cup of tea. And again, a lot of the songs that weren't really marketed as singles I think are better than the ones that were. And last, but certainly not least, we have Miss Pop Princess herself, Taylor Swift, with Red. This is one that I definitely judged based on the singles. My judgment was not good initially. The singles you probably remember from this are going to be 22, I Knew You Were Trouble, and then We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. However, if you were listening to more country radio, the title song, Red, and then I think Begin Again, were kind of getting pushed more to country radio. And apparently there's also a song called The Last Time, which actually is a really good song. I didn't realize it was a single though. I was researching this and it was listed on Wikipedia as one of the singles and I was like, huh, really? Tell me if you remember ever hearing that song like on the radio or anything, because I don't. This is actually a really solid album, and most of the best songs on it were not singles. Many do not sound like any of the singles, really. I am a big believer that, like, Taylor does sort of the sad, vulnerable ballad much, much better. Much better than sort of the upbeat, catchy stuff. Like, I'm not a fan of Shake It Off. I'm not a fan of her kind of attempting to be more of, like, the happy party song kind of vibe that she occasionally goes for. But her best sad, vulnerable ballads are from Red. This is the album that gave us All Too Well, which is widely regarded within like kind of her fan community to be one of the best songs she's ever written, if not the best. There's a more country sounding one called I Almost Do that I think gets overlooked a lot. That's another really good one. Again, that collaboration she did with Gary Lightbody The Last Time, wonderful. I don't remember it being a single, but apparently it was. But all three of those songs are great, and absolutely none of them sound anything like, you know, I Knew You Were Trouble or 22. You also get some really good, like, live sounding kind of country rock pop stuff. Oftentimes, Taylor's music kind of gets sorted into either the country bucket of, like, Love Story, Our Song, that kind of thing, or the, like, pop bucket of like, oh, Delicate, oh, Blank Space, this very like 80s synth pop stuff that she kind of went to with 89 and later. 89 the album, not the year, obviously. But actually, a lot of the songs on Red are really good and are neither one of those. So I'm talking songs like State of Grace, songs like Holy Ground, songs like what's that, Starlight, The Lucky One. There's a lot of stuff on here that's this kind of like, not really country, but also not that like layered vocal 80s synth sound that she went to with her next album. And I think that sound really suited her quite well. And I wish she would kind of make more music like that. But the best examples of it are probably the deluxe edition exclusive tracks from Red, which would be like The Moment I Knew or Come Back Be Here. And yeah, I feel bad because for the longest time I thought I just like didn't like Taylor Swift. But in reality it was just I didn't really like the main radio singles. But there's a lot of good stuff on Red. It's another one that's probably not a great pick if you really insist on a lot of like cohesion, but there's some really good tracks on here. Some really good tracks that are not singles, don't really sound like the singles, so definitely worth your time if you haven't given this one a full listen already. So hopefully you liked this video. Definitely let me know what your favorite like albums you shouldn't judge by the single are. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. My name's Anne, and thanks you so much for watching. Bye-bye.